The Last Candle. Japanese Ghost Stories for Sleep. Episode 7. 10 Stories, Told Slowly, by Candlelight. Tonight's 10 stories. The Ghost Who Bought Candy. Tsukumogami, The Souls of Old Things. The Wolves of Tono. Kakura-Sama, The Forgotten God. A Legend of Fugen-Bosatsu. Ikiryo, The Living Ghost. Shiryo, The Father's Errand. The Fountain of Youth. Azuki-Arai, The Bean Washer, and Horai, The Blue Dream Country. Good evening. And welcome back to The Last Candle. 39 candles are burning tonight. 60 stories lie behind us now, each one paid for with a small flame, and the room grows darker and softer every night, which is exactly as the old game intended. If you are new here, the rule is old and simple. 100 candles, one story for each, and the 100th story never told, so that the last candle may burn on, and keep us all safe in its glow. Tonight is a gentle night, perhaps the gentlest we have kept. A mother's ghost who went shopping for candy. The small souls that live in old tools. The courteous wolves of the northern mountains, and at the end, the blue dream country of Horai, which is the right place to fall asleep in. You need not stay awake. The candles will keep count for you. Let us begin. Story 1. The Ghost Who Bought Candy. Our first story tonight is the most beloved ghost story in Japan, not the most famous, perhaps, but the most beloved, which is a different and better thing. It is told in 100 towns, and each town insists it happened there, at that shop, on that street, and the story is called Kozadate Urei, the child-raising ghost. In a small town, choose any, the story will not mind, there was a shop that sold candy, little ambered sugar drops, and syrup on a stick for children. And the shopkeeper, closing up one summer night, heard the door slide open, and a young woman stood there, pale, in white, with her hair loose about her shoulders, and held out one small coin, and said, in a voice like wind in the pines, "Candy, please." He served her, of course. Trade is trade, and the hour was late, and if the woman was strange, well, the world is full of strange, tired women, and most of them have good reasons. She took the candy and slipped away into the dark. And the next night she came again, with another single coin. And the next night. And the next. 6 nights, 6 coins, 6 little papers of candy. On the 7th night she came with no coin at all, and stood in the doorway with her head bowed, and held out, instead, a small padded jacket, a child's jacket, in pawn. "Please," said the voice. "The candy. It is not for me." Now the shopkeeper was a decent man, and he took the jacket and gave her the candy and thought no more of the bargain than that it was a sad one. But the next morning a neighbor saw the little jacket hanging in the shop, and went white, and said, "That jacket was buried last week. On the young wife of so-and-so, who died with her baby still unborn. I helped sew it into the coffin myself." So they went, the whole street of them, quiet in the summer morning, up to the temple graveyard, and from beneath the new-turned earth of that very grave, they heard it. Thin as a reed. Unmistakable. A baby, crying. They dug, the priest first, they say, with his own hands, and found the mother as she had been buried. And in the crook of her arm, alive, warm, wailing with splendid healthy fury, a newborn child, born in the grave, and around it, 6 little empty papers of candy, and the 7th, half finished, beside its small fist. You see what she had done. Dead, she could not nurse the child, but the dead, it seems, are given a little allowance for emergencies, the 6 coins placed in her coffin, as the custom was, to pay her passage across the river of the dead. She had spent her ferry fare, all of it, coin by coin, night by night, on candy for her baby. And when the money was gone she had pawned the last thing she owned. She never crossed the river at all. She had somewhere better to be. The child was lifted out and given to the temple, and the priest raised him, and here every version of the story agrees, from one end of Japan to the other, the boy grew up strong, and became a monk of great and unusual kindness, the kind of kindness, people said, of a man who had been loved fiercely before he was even born, by someone who had nothing, from beyond her own death, and made it enough. And the mother? With the child safe in the priest's arms, they say, the crying stopped, and the grave settled, and she never walked again. There was nothing left to walk for. Whatever ferry she had missed, we may trust the river made an exception. The dead who spend their fare on love, all the priests agree, are carried across free of charge. In some towns they will still show you the shop, 7th generation now, still selling candy, and the little amber drops are called yuri-aim, ghost candy, and parents buy them for children with the whole story attached, so that no child in that town has ever once been afraid of this particular ghost. Why would they be? She is the proof of the oldest comfort there is, that love does not stop when the heart does. It just goes shopping, if it has to. So of all the ghosts we have met in 60 stories, let this one see us toward sleep tonight, a young mother in the dark, hurrying home from the candy shop, entirely unafraid of the graveyard, because her baby is in it, and the baby is hungry, and love has exactly one errand and knows the way in the dark. The child is fed. The jacket is redeemed. The ferry has waited, it always waits, for mothers, and the whole graveyard is quiet now, settled and warm as a nursery. Nothing in the dark tonight is anything worse than that. Sleep well. The story of the ghost who bought candy is told. One more candle goes out. 38 remain, and the next tale begins. Story 2. Tsukumogami, the Souls of Old Things. Our second story is not about one ghost but about 10,000 very small ones, the gentlest haunting ever devised by any people. It is the old Japanese belief called Tsukumogami, the souls of old things. The doctrine, as the old scrolls set it down, is simplicity itself. Any object that serves faithfully for 100 years earns a soul. The teapot, the broom, the paper umbrella, the sandal, the lantern, the comb, serve a household for a century, and on the 100th new year, quietly, with no ceremony at all, the thing wakes up. Think what this meant in an old house. The Japanese home of those centuries was full of things that lasted: iron kettles handed from grandmother to granddaughter, chests that outlived their carpenters, garden brooms mended and remended until no stick of the original remained, and yet, somehow, it was still the same broom. Every one of them, ticking quietly toward its 100th year, like a long slow fuse of soul. And what do things do, once they wake? The old picture scrolls are full of answers, and they are wonderful. The awakened tools hold processions. On certain nights, the last night of the year was a favorite, the 100-year-old things of a district would slip from their shelves and closets and march together down the empty midnight streets, the umbrella hopping on its one leg, the kettle marching on stubby new feet, the lute playing itself, the scrolls unrolling importantly, a parade of the patient, out on the town at last, seen by no one but late travelers, who wisely bowed and gave them the road. Were they dangerous? Almost never, and here the old belief shows its fine moral grain. The Tsukumogami that turned spiteful were, specifically, the discarded ones, tools thrown out carelessly on the eve of their 100th year, so close to a soul, and denied it at the last, which then rattled about the house in a temper, hiding needles and souring soup, until they were treated properly. And treated properly meant one thing: thanked. For this the old people had a whole calendar of small ceremonies, and some survive to this day. Broken needles, after a lifetime of service, are not thrown away, they are carried to the temple and laid to rest, gently, in a block of soft tofu, so that their last bed should be an easy one. Worn-out brushes are given funerals. Old dolls are brought to the shrine and burned with prayers, like retainers of a great house. There is a mound at one temple in Kyoto for spectacles, another for tea whisks, another, in our own day, for semiconductor chips, because the belief simply expanded to meet the times, as good beliefs do. You may smile at that, and then you may notice, as the old priests intended, what the belief was actually for. A people who suspect their teapot of having feelings do not throw the teapot at the wall. They mend it. Japan mended everything, for centuries, mended, relacquered, patched with gold, and the country's whole deep habit of care for objects, which the world now admires in museums, begins in this nursery tale premise, that use is service, and service earns gratitude, and gratitude is owed even to a broom. The philosophers of the Muromachi scrolls put it loftily: even an insentient thing, they wrote, may attain enlightenment, nothing in the universe is mere. But the household version was warmer and shorter. Take care of your things, grandmother said, folding the 100-year kettle in a cloth for the night, they know. And so the old houses at midnight were, by their own reckoning, quietly full, not of ghosts in any fearful sense, but of staff. The kettle keeping the memory of every fire. The comb remembering every head it had smoothed, 3 generations of the same hair. The umbrella that had kept the rain off a courting couple, and their daughter, and hers. All of them awake past their 100th year, pensioned and contented, creaking companionably in the dark, the sounds an old house makes at night being, on this theory, simply the conversation of the help. It is the only ghost story I know in which the haunting is a reward, in which presence, lingering, refusing to leave, is not unfinished business but finished business, a century of usefulness, settling into its long, warm retirement in the corners of the room. So listen to your own room for a moment, as you lie there. The tick of the cooling lamp. The small shift of the chair. The floor settling where you walked. If the old scrolls are right, nothing in the dark around you is strange, it is the opposite of strange. It is everything that has served you, resting too. The parade is over for tonight, the umbrella has hopped home, the kettle is back on its shelf with its feet tucked up. Every faithful thing in the house is falling asleep around you, in order of age, and you, who win them and wear them and warm them, are the heart of the household they keep. They know the night watch. They have kept it for 100 years. Sleep well. The story of Tsukumogami, the souls of old things is told. One more candle goes out. 37 remain, and the next tale begins. Story 3. The Wolves of Tono. Our third story returns to the valleys of Tono, in the far north, to the tales the old people told about the wolves. For there were wolves in Japan once, the Okami, small and gray and clever, and in Tono, within living memory of the men who spoke to Yanagita, wolves and villagers had lived alongside one another for 1,000 years, in a relationship the tales describe not as war, but as neighborliness. You must hear how the people of Tono spoke of them. Not vermin. Not monsters. The wolf in the Old North was half a god, the messenger of the mountain deity, the honorable one of the high passes, and the tales of Tono treat wolves precisely the way one treats a proud and slightly dangerous neighbor, with respect, with distance, and with a strict etiquette that both sides, remarkably, kept. The etiquette went like this. A traveler crossing the passes at night who heard the wolves singing to one another across the valleys did not run, running, as with all the proud peoples of the mountains, was the one rude thing. He walked on steadily, and said aloud, courteously, into the dark, I am only passing through. I carry nothing of yours. Guard the road well, honorable one. And the singing, the old men swore, would pass over him like weather, and nothing would come near. And the wolves kept their side. Yanagita set down the testimony of hunters who had met a wolf face to face on a narrow trail, each party stopping, regarding the other, and then the wolf stepping deliberately off the path, uphill, and sitting, and waiting for the man to pass, exactly as one does for a neighbor on a narrow footbridge. The hunters bowed as they went by. They were quite serious about this. One does not forget one's manners, they said, merely because the neighbor has teeth. There were darker entries, for the neighborliness had rules and the rules had teeth of their own. The tales tell of a man who found wolf cubs in a den and, thinking of the bounty, took them, and of how the wolves of the whole region knew, in the way the mountain knows things, and how that one farm, only that one, lost horses that season, one by one, until the debt was called even. The village did not console the man overmuch. You knew the rules, they said. Everyone knows the rules. But set against that, listen to this entry, which Yanagita gives in a few flat lines and which I have never forgotten. A pack of wolves, one hard winter, took to howling every night on the hill above a certain village, night after night, wretchedly, until no one could sleep. And the village elders, rather than reaching for spears, sat down and asked the sensible Tono question, what is wrong with them? And someone remembered, A wolf had been found dead that week, caught in a slide of rocks, and the howling was on the hill above where it lay. So the villagers went up, in a body, carrying rice and dried fish, and dug the dead wolf out of the rocks, and buried it properly, with the food beside it, and one of the old men said over the grave the same word said over a man, "Rest now, the mountain keeps you." And the howling stopped that night. And the next autumn, the tale finishes, in Tono's flat voice that never underlines anything. Wild game was strangely plentiful near that village, and the deer stayed out of the barley, and everyone understood that a courtesy had been returned. Grief, answered with a funeral. A funeral, answered with a favor. Whatever we moderns believe about wolves, the people of Tono believed this, that the mountain kept books, and kept them fairly, and that kindness entered on one page was paid out on another, between species, across the dark, without a word of common language needed. The wolves of Japan are gone now, the last of them died a century ago, about when Yanagita was writing his book, and he seems to have known it was coming. There is a farewell tenderness in how carefully he wrote the wolf entries down. But in Tono they will tell you the mountain deity still keeps his messengers, in some form or other, and hikers on the old passes still sometimes leave a bit of rice on a stone, for the honorable one, whoever he is now, because it costs little, and the rules are good rules, and one does not stop being a good neighbor merely because the neighbor has moved away. It is a fine thing to fall asleep beside this old treaty, the knowledge that even between wolf and farmer, even in the hungriest winters of the hardest country, courtesy held. Two kinds of creature who could not speak one word to each other managed, for 1,000 years, to share the narrow trail, simply by each stepping aside, in turn, and bowing. The passes are quiet tonight. The singing on the ridges is only wind now, and the wind carries no grudge against you. You have taken nothing of the mountains, and the mountain knows its own books. The rice is on the stone. The road is guarded. The old treaty holds. Walk on steadily into sleep, then, saying the traveler's words if you like, I am only passing through. I carry nothing of yours, guard the road well. And the night will pass over you like weather, and nothing will come near. Sleep well. The story of the wolves of Tono is told. One more candle goes out. 36 remain, and the next tale begins. Story 4. Kakura-Sama, the Forgotten God. Our fourth story is the smallest tale in the Tono collection, and among the strangest, and it has no ghost in it at all, unless a god can be a kind of ghost, when everyone has forgotten him. It is the story of Kakura-Sama. In a certain hamlet of the Tono country, at a bend of the road, there stood from time out of mind a wooden image, a god, carved long ago, of what god no one any longer knew. The paint had gone. The face had softened with 200 years of rain until it had no features to speak of, just a gentle wooden oldness, about the height of a child. And the children of the hamlet played with him. That is the story. That is nearly all of it. The children of that road, generation after generation, treated the old image as a playmate. They hauled him from his stand and rode him down the snowbanks in winter. They dressed him in leaves. They stood him up as the guard of their snow forts. they dragged him to the river on hot days and floated him, solemnly, as a boat for their smallest companions of straw. And their grandmothers, who had done exactly the same in their own day, watched from the doorways and said nothing. Now, a traveling priest came through that country. This is the part Yanagita heard from the old men, and saw the children rolling a sacred image down a hill in the snow, shrieking with joy, and was horrified, as a professional man would be. He rescued the god, set him upright, scolded the children away, and lectured the hamlet on reverence. An image so old, so holy, it must be housed, roofed, fenced, respected. And the hamlet, abashed before so certain a visitor, did as he said. They built a little fence, and set Kakura-Sama behind it. And the crops failed that year, and a sickness came through the children of that road, mild but stubborn, and old people dreamed, several of them, the same short dream, of an old wooden man standing at a fence, looking out, saying nothing. So the hamlet took the fence down. Quietly, without consulting the priest, who had in any case moved on to improve some other village. The children, who understand these matters far better than priests, had Kakura-Sama out on the snowbank within the hour, and the sickness passed, and the next harvest was fat, and the matter was never discussed again, because in Tono the things that matter most are never discussed, only done. What kind of god wants to be played with? The old men of Tono, pressed by Yanagita, gave the question some thought, and answered with another question, which is the North Country way: what is worship, do you think? The offerings of frightened grown-ups, made at arm's length, once a year, with one eye on the weather? Or the company of children every single day, their hands on you constantly, their games built around you, their smallest ones set on your lap for safe-keeping, being, without one word of prayer in a century, the absolute center of the only congregation that never doubts? Kakura-Sama had, the old men reckoned, the best worship in Japan. Every other god in the province stood roofed and fenced and reverenced, and lonely, visited on festival days, feared a little, dusted annually. He alone was loved the way a grandfather is loved, familiarly, roughly, all the time, by people too young to know he was supposed to be frightening, and whatever power lives in such images, his had grown fat and mild on it, like a stove that is never let go out. There is a lesson folded in here somewhere about ourselves, about how the things we set behind fences, out of respect, are often only made lonely by it, and how the sacred, whatever it is, seems to prefer handling to distance, prefers to be climbed on, worn smooth, included, prefers the snowbank to the shrine. But Tono does not press lessons, and neither will we. The image is still there, they say, or one very like him, at his bend of the road, featureless as a river stone now, smooth as 300 winters of mittens could make him, on duty tonight as every night, unroofed, unfenced, perfectly content, keeping the road while his congregation sleeps. And they do sleep. Every child of that hamlet for 3 centuries has fallen asleep within sight of his bend in the road, guarded by the god they sled on, the safest children, one imagines, in the whole spirit-crowded north. Be one of them tonight. The old smooth presence at the bend of the road asks no prayers, no fear, no fence, only that you rest easy, as his children always have. Sleep well. The story of Kakura-Sama, the forgotten god, is told. One more candle goes out. 35 remain, and the next tale begins. Story 5. A Legend of Fugen-Bosatsu. Our fifth story is from Hearn's Shadowings, a tale he translated from a 12th century collection, so it was already 700 years old when he found it. It is called A Legend of Fugen-Bosatsu, and it is about a holy man who was granted a vision, and what the vision turned out to be. There was once a priest of great austerity, a genuine one, the story is careful to say, old, learned, strict with himself and no one else, who had spent 50 years in study and prayer at his mountain temple. And above all things he venerated Fugen-Bosatsu, the Bodhisattva of universal goodness, whom the sutras picture riding upon a white elephant with 6 tusks, shining like the moon. And one evening, at the end of a long retreat, a thought settled on the old priest with the weight of a promise, that if he watched and prayed this night with a pure heart, he would be permitted, before dawn, to see Fugen-Bosatsu with his living eyes. Now in the village below the mountain there lived a woman of the pleasure quarter, a singing girl, what the capital politely called an asobi, whom the district loved and the respectable pitied. And this same night, as it happened, she was entertaining guests at a house near the temple, and the old priest, on his way to his vigil, passed the lit windows and heard her singing, and the respectable men of his escort frowned, but the priest, the story notes, did not frown. He said only, "What a beautiful voice," and went on up the mountain. He kept his vigil. Incense, and the sutra of meditation, and the long cold hours, and past the middle of the night, the air of the shrine room began to shine, and there, in a light like moonrise on snow, came Fugen-Bosatsu upon the 6-tusked elephant, exactly as the sutras promise, splendid beyond all description, and the old priest wept with joy and pressed his forehead to the floor. But among his guests that night there was a young monk, a doubting, clever young monk, and this young man, glancing sidelong at the glory, saw something else. He rubbed his eyes. He looked again. And where the old priest saw the Bodhisattva in radiance, the young monk saw, quite plainly, the singing girl from the village, sitting on a white farm ox, in her festival robes, looking, he would say afterward, tired, and kind, and a little amused. The young monk, being clever, said nothing until dawn, and then, being young, said everything. "Master, what did you see?" And the old priest described the glory. And the young monk, trembling, described the girl on the ox. And the other guests, questioned one by one, described, each a different thing, one, a light like the moon, one, a lady in robes, one, only the shrine as it always was, with a scent of plum blossom that had no source. And the old priest, hearing all of it, did not grow angry, and did not doubt his vision. He sat a long while, and then he laughed, softly, with his whole worn face, and gave the judgment for which the story has been retold for 800 years. Each of us, he said, was shown what he could carry. To me was given the elephant and the light, because 50 years of sutras have built a door in me that shape can enter by. To you was given a tired, kind woman on an ox, and I tell you, that was not a lesser vision. It may have been the truer one. Universal goodness has no form of its own, so it borrows. Tonight it borrowed her. And he went down the mountain, the story finishes, and called on the singing girl, to her considerable alarm, and thanked her, with a full bow, for her trouble. And she said, laughing, that she had done nothing but sing and sleep. And he said, just so. That is often how it is done. And from that day he was gentler with everyone in the village, respectable or otherwise, for, as he told the young monk, one never knows whom goodness is wearing. Hearn loved this tale above almost any he translated, and it is easy to feel why. It takes the highest thing in its sky, the very bodhisattva of goodness, and finds it, deliberately, in the least respectable person in the village, and it does this not to lower heaven but to raise the street. Every tired kind woman, the story says, every voice singing late from a lit window, whoever helped you today without ceremony, one never knows. Bow generally, to be safe. It is also, for our purposes, a perfect story about the hour of sleep, for the vision came, note, at the bottom of the night, to a man who had stopped grasping and simply kept still with a hopeful heart. That is all a vigil is. You are keeping one now. So keep it without effort, eyes closing, heart unclenched, and whatever crosses the dark of your mind toward morning, riding its elephant or its plain white ox, let it approach. It will be wearing whatever form you can carry tonight. It was always goodness. Sleep well. The story of a legend of Fugen-Bosatsu is told. One more candle goes out. 34 remain, and the next tale begins. Story 6. Ikiryo, the Living Ghost. Our sixth story is a curiosity of the old Japanese ghost lore, preserved by Hearn and Kato. Most ghosts, of course, are of the dead. But the old belief allowed for another and stranger kind, the Ikiryo, the ghost of a person still alive. The doctrine ran like this. A soul, in the old reckoning, is not nailed to its body like a roof to a house. It is more like the light of a lamp, and if a living heart burns hot enough with one single feeling, longing, or grief, or bitter resentment, the light may spill. Some part of the person, without their knowledge, may go quietly out of them at night, while they sleep, and walk, and be seen, doing the thing the heart cannot stop doing. Hearn's tale is of a merchant house in a provincial town, prosperous, orderly, and troubled. For at the same hour every evening, in the storeroom of the shop, the apprentices began to see a woman. Not a fearful figure, a respectable townswoman, soberly dressed, standing among the bales in the dimness with her back to the door, counting. They could hear the soft flick of her fingers. Counting, and sighing, and counting again. Naturally they thought her a ghost, and naturally the master sent for a priest. But the priest, a shrewd old man, watched the figure for 2 evenings from the doorway, and then asked the master an odd question: who, in this town, believes you owe her money? And the master went grey. For there was such a woman, a widow, from whom, years before, in the founding days of the shop, he had taken a loan, repaid, he insisted, repaid in full, but repaid meanly, without thanks, with the interest counted to the last coin and not a bow more, and there had been a misunderstanding over one final payment, a small sum, which each believed the other owed, and rather than lose face he had let the friendship die of it. She lived 3 streets away. She was, as far as anyone knew, in good health. "She is asleep at this hour," said the priest, "and she does not know she comes here. But her heart has been standing in your storeroom for 11 years, counting what she believes she is owed. The dead can be prayed to rest, but there is no sutra for this. There is only the debt. Pay it." And the master, to his credit, and to the story's everlasting point, did not argue the arithmetic. He went the next morning, 3 streets, with the disputed sum and a gift besides, and bowed to the ground in the widow's doorway, and said the words that 11 years of pride had priced too high: "I have been in your debt, in more ways than the money, and I am ashamed it took me so long to come." And the widow, Hearn tells us, wept, not over the coins, and served him tea, and they talked until evening, of her late husband, and of the founding days, when they had all been young and poor together. And that night, and every night after, the storeroom held nothing but bales, for the part of her that counted in the dark had finally been allowed to stop. The strangest touch is the last one, the widow never knew. She was told, later, delicately, and laughed and refused to believe a word. She, haunt a storeroom. She slept sound every night, thank you. And the priest, asked about this, said it was the usual way. The hearts that walk at night are precisely the ones their owners have stopped listening to by day. We are, he said, the last to be introduced to our own ghosts. That is the lore of the Ikiryo, and you can see it is really a story about the living, wearing a thin ghost costume. Every unfinished feeling walks somewhere, it says. The grudge stands counting in someone's storeroom, the unspoken apology waits in someone's doorway, and no priest can lay them, only the small, mortifying, ordinary act of going 3 streets over and saying the thing. But notice, for tonight's purposes, what the story promises: the walking stops. The moment the debt was honored, not litigated, honored, the storeroom emptied, the widow's sleep grew sweet as a child's, and 2 old friends got back a friendship with 11 good years still left in it. No haunting in all our 100 nights has been cheaper to end. So if some small part of you is out counting in a storeroom tonight, and most of us keep at least one such clerk on the night shift, be easy, it can be called home any morning you choose, for the price of 3 streets and a bow. For now, call everything home. All of you, gathered in, under one warm roof, off duty. Nothing of yours is walking tonight. Sleep well. The story of Ikiryo, the living ghost, is told. One more candle goes out. 33 remain, and the next tale begins. Story 7. Shiryo, the Father's Errand. Our 7th story is the companion piece to the last, for where the Ikiryo is the ghost of the living, the Shiryo is the plain honest ghost of the dead. Hearn set this one down in Kato from the records of an old samurai family, and it is short, and dry, and quietly devastating in the way that family stories are. It concerns a father who came back on business. There died, in a castle town of the north, a samurai of middle rank named Matsuoka, a punctilious man, a keeper of accounts and duties, who had served his clan 40 years without one day's irregularity. He died in the winter, of an illness, with proper farewells, leaving grown sons in good positions and his affairs, everyone assumed, in perfect order, because his affairs had never once, in 40 years, been in any other condition. On the 7th night after the funeral, his eldest son woke, not with a start, but simply and completely, as if called, and the father was in the room. Not misty, not terrible, sitting formally in the lamplight that was not lit, in his everyday hakama, with the slight frown he had worn for 40 years of accounts. And he said, in his ordinary voice, "In the third drawer of my letter chest, beneath the false bottom, there is a paper. It must not be found by the clan inspectors. Burn it." And he bowed to his own son, which in life he had never done, and was not there anymore. The son, being his father's son, did not wait for morning. He went with a lamp to the letter chest, and found the third drawer, and found, he had not known it existed, the false bottom. And beneath it, one paper. It was a promissory note, 40 years old, from the father's youth, recording a debt of money borrowed, in some early desperation the family never learned the shape of, from a man long dead, and never repaid. That was all. A young man's debt, hidden a whole lifetime, carried in silence under 40 years of perfect accounts, the one irregularity, the one crooked plank in that immaculate floor, and the dying body had failed before the hand could reach the drawer. Now the son sat with the paper a long time, and here the family record, Hearn says, becomes very fine. For the son understood that his father had asked one thing: burn it. Hide it. Keep the name clean. And the son understood also, being that man's son, what the request had cost, and what honoring it would make of them both. So he did not burn it. In the morning he dressed formally, and went to the family of the long-dead lender, to a grandson, a tradesman who knew nothing of any note, and laid the paper on the mat, and beside it the full sum with 40 years of interest, counted to the last coin in his father's own exact style, and said, "My father was unable to complete this matter in his lifetime. I am here to complete it." And he told no one else, ever. The record we have was written by his own son, after him. And that night the father came again, the last time, and sat in the same place, in the same lamplight. And said nothing at all. He only looked at his son for a long moment, with, the record says, the face he had never once worn over the accounts, a face with no frown in it whatever, and bowed again, lower than before, and was gone, and the house was empty of him, in the way a house is only empty when something has finished. The old commentators like to argue about this story. The father asked for concealment, they point out, and the son gave him exposure, disobedience. And the wiser ones answer, no. The father asked for the debt to stop hurting. He asked in the only words his shame could find. The son heard through the words to the errand under them, and the second bow, lower than the first, is the proof of the hearing. The dead, they conclude, ask badly, being ashamed like the rest of us. Answer what they mean. What stays with you is the smallness of it. 40 years of nights, a whole distinguished life, and under the false bottom, not a scandal, not a crime, a young man's promissory note. That is what held him. That is so often what holds anyone, not the great sins, which get confessed, but the small shames, which get drawers built around them. And what a gentle mercy the story finally is, because the debt was payable. It had waited 40 years and it was settled in one morning, with a bow, by someone who loved him. Nothing in the drawer, the story promises, is ever as heavy as the carrying of it, and even the errands we die with can be finished by kind hands. Your own drawers can wait for morning, and whatever is in them is smaller than the dark makes it feel, and payable, and probably one bow away from settled. The Father is at rest. The ledger of that whole exact life is closed, clean at last, every column true. Let yours close too, just for tonight, unaudited, uninspected, good enough. Sleep well. The story of Shiryo, the father's errand, is told. One more candle goes out. 32 remain, and the next tale begins. Story 8. The Fountain of Youth. Our eighth story is one Hearn retold for children, from a folk tale far older than any book, and like the best children's stories it has a small sly wisdom in it that improves with the listener's age. It is the story of the Fountain of Youth. There was once an old woodcutter who lived with his old wife at the edge of the mountain forest. They had been young together and poor together and old together, their children were grown and gone down to the towns, and the two of them went on, in their small house under the big trees, cutting wood and drying beans and being, in the undramatic way of long marriages, everything either of them had. One summer day, deep in a part of the forest he did not know, the old man found a spring. It came up cold and bright among white stones, in a stillness like the inside of a bell, and he was hot, and tired, and he knelt and drank. And the taste of it went through him like the first morning of the world. He stood up, and his back stood up with him, straight as a young cedar. His hands, when he looked at them, were smooth and brown. His beard, when he touched it, was black. In the mirror of the pool a young man looked back at him, the very young man his wife had married 40 years before, laughing with all his own teeth. He ran home, he had not run in 20 years, and oh, the joy of running, and burst in upon his wife, who very naturally screamed at the strange young man in her doorway wearing her husband's clothes. And when he had explained, and she had touched his young face with her old hands and believed him, she did not say a word more, but walked straight out of the house toward the forest, at a pace remarkable in a woman of her years. Drink moderately, he called after her, suddenly uneasy, and being a wise man in most matters, he should have gone along. For the old wife reached the spring among the white stones, and knelt, and thought of her husband's young face, and of her own gray hairs, and of the 40 years, and she did not drink moderately. She drank, deep, and long, and again, wanting not just morning but the whole spring of the world at once. When she did not come back, the young old man went after her, calling, through the darkening woods, to the spring among the white stones. And she was not there. Only her clothes lay by the water, in a soft heap, and from inside them came a small, thin, furious sound. And he knelt, with his heart in his mouth, and drew back the folds of the robe, and found, waving its small fists at the evening sky, red-faced and indignant and utterly new, a baby. A little girl, some months old at the most. She had drunk too far back. Past girlhood, past childhood, all the way to the very beginning, and there is no drinking forward again. The spring gives youth, but it does not give it twice. And now comes the ending, and the reason the tale has been told to sleepy children for 500 years. The young man sat by the spring a long time, with the baby who had been his wife blinking up at him from her bundle of familiar clothes. And then he laughed, a long, helpless, tender laugh, the kind that is 9/10 love and 1/10 despair, and gathered her up, and carried her home, and warmed milk. And he raised her. What else? He was young now, with a young man's strength and 40 years of a good husband's patience, and he had loved her at every age she had ever been. What was one more? The tale says he called her by her own old name, that she grew up sunny and quick, remembering nothing, in the house under the big trees, and that the neighbors, who knew the whole story, villages always know, treated it with perfect country tact, and simply said the woodcutter's household seemed somehow to have found a second spring. Some tellers add that when she was grown, he told her everything, by the fire, one winter, and she was quiet a while, and then said, "Then you have loved me twice around, and married him all over again," which may be tidy nonsense, or may be exactly what happened. Folk tales keep their own counsel about such things. The moral the old grandmothers drew was blunt: take your blessings by the mouthful, not by the barrel. But under it there is a softer one, and it is the one to sleep on, that what the man truly had, the spring could neither give him nor take away, someone to carry home, and warm milk for, and begin again with. Youth was the small gift. That was the large one. You need no spring tonight, sleep is the moderate drink of it, the mouthful, the exactly right amount, every night a little of the water, and morning always finds you renewed just enough. Drink it slowly now, cool and dark and rising among white stones, one swallow, another, no further back than yesterday. Sleep well. The story of the Fountain of Youth is told. One more candle goes out. 31 remain, and the next tale begins. Story 9. Azuki-Arai, the Bean Washer. Our ninth story is about the least frightening monster in Japan, a creature so mild, so shy, and so devoted to its one strange occupation that the country folk could never quite decide whether to fear it or to feel a little sorry for it. It is called the Azuki-Arai, the Bean Washer. Here is what the Azuki-Arai does. On quiet evenings, by streams at the edge of villages, always at the edge, always at dusk, always just out of sight around a bend or under a bank, it washes red azuki beans. That is all. That is the entire terror. From the waterside comes a rhythmic sound, shoki shoki, shoki shoki, the unmistakable swish of beans being rinsed in a basket, where no person is. Every province knew the sound, and every province agreed on the details. You never see him. Those who claim the glimpse, and they are few, and none of them reliable, and all of them describe something different, spoke of a small stooped figure, knee-high perhaps, with big eyes and thin arms, crouched at the water utterly absorbed in his work. But mostly there is only the sound, shoki shoki, shoki shoki, and sometimes, in the better documented districts, a little song muttered over the water, "Shall I wash my beans, or shall I catch a person to eat?" Shoki shoki. Now that song sounds alarming, until you learn the great open secret of the Azuki-Arai, attested in every single tale ever told of him: he has never caught anyone. Not once. In 400 years of recorded bean washing, from the far north to the southern islands, the count of persons eaten stands at 0. The song, the old people concluded, is pure bravado, the sort of thing a very small creature mutters to feel bigger, the way a house cat, deep in its throat, addresses a heron through the window. The Azuki-Arai's actual weapon, deployed against those who came looking for him, was this: you would slip on the wet bank and sit down hard in the stream. That is his entire arsenal. The tales are full of bold young men who marched to the water's edge to catch the bean washer, and marched home soaked to the waist while the shoki resumed serenely somewhere else, a little further down. One suspects him of enjoying this. One would. What was he? The scholars offer the usual furniture, the sound of a particular shallows over gravel, a night bird whose call resembles rinsing, foxes, who in Japan are blamed for everything, a weasel washing its dinner. The folk knew all these theories and set them aside, on the sensible grounds that a sound which retreats when followed, chooses twilight, keeps to the village edge, and sings about beans, is not a bird. It is somebody. A very minor somebody, with one job. And gradually, all over Japan, he was adopted rather than feared. The sound became almost companionable, a sign the evening was proceeding properly. Housewives hearing it would remark, the way one remarks on a neighbor's routine, "Ah, he's at it early tonight." Children were told he was counting the beans for all the household's luck, and that hearing him meant tomorrow's rice would cook well. In some villages, they left him a scoop of real azuki on a flat stone by the stream, and if the beans were gone by morning, well, herons must eat too, but it was nicer to think otherwise. There is something in the Azuki-Arai that the grander ghosts of our 100 Nights entirely lack, and it is worth naming: contentment. Oiwo wanted justice, the sea monk wanted panic, even the gentle dead wanted Errand's run. The bean washer wants to wash beans. He has wanted it for 4 centuries. He is the one supernatural being in the whole national roster with no grievance, no unfinished business, no message for the living, only a task he apparently loves, the world's supply of which is inexhaustible. The old Edo commentators, who ranked their monsters the way we rank everything, used to place the Azuki-Arai at the absolute bottom of the fearsome scale, and then one of them, in a marginal note that deserves to be famous, added, "And yet consider, he is also the only one of them all that is happy." Perhaps that is the use of him, and why the villages half loved their little launderer of luck. He is proof that even in the spirit world, even there, among all that longing and owing and wandering, it is possible to simply have a small good job by the water, and do it every evening, and sing to yourself, and be entirely, foolishly content. If a knee-high goblin can manage it, the note implies, there is hope for the rest of us. So he is out there tonight, at the edge of some village, at his bend of some stream, crouched over the basket, absorbed, muttering his harmless terrible song to the minnows, shoki shoki, shoki shoki, the most peaceful sound in all of Japanese folklore, somebody else, contentedly, doing the chores. Let it be your sleeping sound tonight. Rain on the roof, water over stones, the little rhythmic rinse of beans that were never going to be anything but beans, shoki shoki, shoki shoki, the luck being counted, the evening proceeding properly, everything at the edge of the village exactly where it belongs. Sleep well. The story of Azuki-Arai, the bean washer, is told. One more candle goes out. 30 remain, and the next tale begins. Story 10. Horai, the Blue Dream Country. Our last story tonight is barely a story at all, it is a place. Hearn put it at the end of Kwaidan, his greatest book, as if he too wanted his readers to fall asleep there, and so we will end our 70 stories where he ended, in the land called Horai. Horai is the blessed isle of old Chinese and Japanese legend, the mountain island far out in the eastern sea, where there is no death and no winter, and the immortals live in palaces of pearl. The old pictures show it rising from the waves in terraces of cloud, and for 2,000 years, emperors sent expeditions to find it, and the expeditions came back empty-handed or, more wisely, did not come back at all. But Hearn, who had lived long in Japan by the time he wrote, said the old pictures and the emperors had it wrong. Horai, he said, is real, he had seen it, but it is not what the legends claim. There are no palaces of pearl. There is no magic fruit of life. And the wonderful things of Horai are not what treasure hunters would recognize as wonderful at all. What is strange about Horai, Hearn wrote, is the atmosphere. The light there is whiter than any other light, a milk-white shining, soft as sight itself, and the air of the place is not air. It is a substance made of spirit, the blended ghosts of millions and millions of souls, so old that the quality of them has become the very thing you breathe. And whoever breathes that air takes those souls into their own blood, and the old, gentle expectations of all those vanished generations begin to work in them, and change their senses, until the world looks as it looked to the ancient dead, kindlier, quieter, full of small meanings, lit from within. And this is what living in that atmosphere does, and here Hearn's account becomes a list of the true treasures of Horai, and you will notice not one of them can be carried away in a ship. In Horai, there is no knowledge of great evil, and so the hearts of the people never grow old. Being always young in heart, they smile from birth until death, except when the gods send sorrow, and even this sorrow they veil. All things in Horai are small and quaint and strange, the houses, the bridges, the boats, and the rice bowls are tiny, because contentment needs so little rice. The people of Horai love one another and trust one another entirely, having no reason not to. They speak to strangers as family, because the word for stranger has fallen out of use. The women move like birds settling, the lamps are never bright, and no one in Horai locks anything, or hurries anywhere, or raises a voice, and shame, in Horai, is felt only for unkindness, which is therefore very rare. By now, of course, you have understood what Hearn is describing, for he says it himself, gently, near the end. Horai is not out in the eastern sea. Horai was the old Japan around him, or rather, the soul of it, the trusting, smiling, small-bold world he had found when he first landed, made of the accumulated gentleness of 100 generations, and already, even as he wrote, dissolving. Evil winds from the west are blowing over Horai, he says, and the magical atmosphere is thinning, shrinking, drawing back into itself. It lingers now only in patches, in a garden at dawn, in an old woman's bow, like those long bright bands of vapor that trail across the morning landscapes of Japanese painters. But, and this is the last thing Hearn ever wrote in Kwaidan, and the note he chose to leave his readers on, it is not gone. Fragments of that luminous haze still drift over the world, he says, and whoever passes through one, even for a moment, in any country, in any century, knows it at once, a sudden causeless gentling of everything, a minute in which strangers seem like family and the rice bowl seems big enough and the heart forgets its own age. That, he says, is Horai. You have been there. You will be there again. And there is one reliable ferry to it, leaving nightly, for the borders of Horai, all the old accounts agree, run somewhere through the country of sleep. The drowsy hour when voices soften and grievances lose their grip and the day's edges melt, that hour is territorial water. You are in the shallows of Horai every night of your life, just before you go under. You are in them now. Feel it? The light behind your eyelids going milk-white and mild, the rooms of the world shrinking to something small and quaint and strange, the air thickening, sweet and old, with the settled souls of everyone who ever fell asleep safe, which is a very great multitude, and good company. 70 stories now, and 70 candles gone, and every one of the stories, if you look back down the long room of them, was a road here. The ghosts wanted rest, the wolves wanted courtesy, the mothers wanted their children fed, the bean washer wanted his stream, all of Japan's great haunted night, wanting, at the bottom of everything, only this shore. So let the boat drift the last little way. No death and no winter here, no locks, no hurry, no strangers, sorrow veiled, hearts unaging, lamps low. The blue dream country has no border guards, only the soft requirement, met by closing your eyes, that you arrive empty-handed. You have arrived. Welcome, once again, to Horai. Sleep well. The story of Horai, the blue dream country, is told. The last of tonight's candles goes out. 29 remain, waiting for another night. And so 10 more candles have gone out, and 29 remain, glowing softly in the dark. The count grows small, and the room grows kind. The candy seller has closed his shutters, smiling. The old tools are dreaming on their shelves. The wolves have gone up the ridge, and the mist of Horai is settling over everything, blue and mild and forgetful. We never tell the 100th story. The last candle is still burning, and it will keep burning, all through the night, for you. The last candle returns every night, with old stories from Japan, some of which the world outside has never heard. But that is for another night. For now, sleep well.